Section 1, the Geography and Rise of Rome. One of the things that I find to be the most mind-boggling is how some small village surrounded by local tribes could go on to create the greatest empire that the world had ever seen. Similar to the geography of Greece, Rome has large mountains that encompass most of the peninsula. It sort of looks like a boot sticking out in the ocean. And there are certain rivers that flow through it. The most notable is probably the Tiber River. They have a mostly mild climate with a dry summer, mild winter, similar to what we experience here in Southern California. They grow citrus and olives and are probably most famous for their grapes. Rome's legends started right after the Trojan War. As you know, the Greeks defeated the Trojans with the help of the Trojan horse, and one of the soldiers from the Trojan army named Aeneas, he wound up sailing after Troy was completely sacked, and it kind of became an Odyssey adventure similar to Odysseus, but this time this is more of going to be the person who first gets to Rome. And there's a whole story about how Aeneas runs into King Latinus, which is why the Romans today speak Latin. Interestingly, two of his descendants were twin boys named Romulus and Remus, who were, as this familiar story goes, sailed down a river in a basket, much similar to both Moses and Sargon. They were adopted by a wolf and nursed by a wolf. As they were raised, they fought for power over who would rule that area of Italy. And of course, Romulus wins because, we don't call the city Rheims, we call it Rome. And Rome winds up killing his brother, and that's where they get the name of the city of Rome. In reality, the people of Rome were a collection of local tribes, including people such as the Etruscans, who were probably mostly nomadic and had their own culture and came to create their own society in what is present-day Rome. In the year 509 BC, the people of Rome created what is known as a republic. And a republic differs a bit from a democracy. The Greeks believed in direct democracy, where the people directly controlled everything through their votes. The Romans believed that the people should elect leaders, and those leaders should go on to make decisions for the people. We in the United States have what's called a democratic republic, so we actually borrow ideas from both the Romans and the Greeks. However, the Romans didn't always have elected leaders. Many of their early leaders were, in fact, dictators. Perhaps the most famous of the dictators was a man named Cincinnatus. And Cincinnatus was a farmer who wound up becoming a war general to fight off some local tribes. And after the Romans were successful, he wound up becoming the country's leader or dictator. But what's interesting about him, and one of the only examples I can think of, maybe King Ashoka of India could be another example, but what Cincinnatus did is right after he became leader, he actually decided to resign because he was scared that Rome would fall into a dictator / kingship province, which he didn't want. There were other problems besides having leaders as well. The people were mostly split between two types of people in society, the patricians and the plebeians. This is something we should be somewhat familiar with because it's just another story of the haves and the have-nots. The patricians were wealthy people who controlled a lot of land, and they were able to have a lot of say-so in the government. The plebeians were the common people, and they wanted to have more say-so, and so there was always that tension, something that we're familiar with in our own country, and most countries are as well. So it's interesting how some things don't really change, even after thousands of years.